The thesis of this video series is that though adhering to a moral code may eventually kill us, that does not free us from the obligation to adhere to a moral code. I'm going to talk about this idea explored in 3 Cormac McCarthy books. This video is about the first one that he wrote, Blood Meridian. Cue intro. There's no intro this week. I'm sorry, I did that. I went there. It was cool. Anyway, Cormac McCarthy is one of my favorite authors. Like, top 3, one of my goats. My mom, Cormac McCarthy, LeBron James. Those are my goats. And I'm going to talk about, in this video, his big 3 books. The Road, No Country for Old Men, and Blood Meridian. I do not own Blood Meridian. I do, however, own the audiobook in German. Fun fact about Jonathan, I do not speak German. The stories in these 3 books all deal with the same idea, which is morality and like its feasibility and the costs to behaving morally in an amoral context, in a world where nobody else is behaving morally. In fact, not even isn't behaving morally, but in a world that actively rewards people for not behaving morally sometimes. In a world like that, can someone adhere to a moral standard with any degree of legitimacy or rigidity and not be literally or metaphorically killed for it? And what's interesting about all 3 of these books is they all come back with a kind of a different answer about that. I'm not going to summarize these books beyond like a couple sentences. You need to have read them for this video. I'm sorry for giving you homework. Actually, no, I'm not. These books are bangers and will enrich your life. Read them. I'm going to go through the books in the order that they were written, which is also the order in which Cormac McCarthy's arguments build on and respond to each other. What I mean by that is each book is going to react to and extrapolate from the ideas explored in the book that came before it. The order is Blood Meridian, No Country for Old Men, The Road. Blood Meridian follows the story of an unnamed protagonist referred to as the Kid, who grows up and leaves home around the age of 15 in Tennessee when he decides there's kind of nothing left for him there. And after 100 pages or so, he gets involved with the Glanton Gang, which was a real-world group of cowboys that were contracted by the Mexican and American governments to hunt down and kill the indigenous populations. They were scalp hunters. And this is where kind of the moral argument of the book starts to pick up. The most memorable character in this book by far is one called Judge Holden, usually just referred to as the Judge. He's 7 feet tall and very pale, and nobody knows where he comes from, and he speaks like 8 languages, and he knows like a lot of stuff, but most importantly, he's way mega evil, like the evilest. If I were to rank fictional characters, he would be the most. And this evil comes out in a kind of a really interesting way. And he does like normal stuff, like he like kills people, and at one point he buys a puppy from a kid just to throw it into the river. Like normal run-of-the-mill villain stuff. But what makes him really a uniquely evil character is 2 things. First, he's an instigator. He's the guy in the group going, listen, no, we're doing a lot of evil stuff, but, and this is just a suggestion, have we considered doing more evil stuff? Could be fun. Could we might like it. I just think about it. Maybe. And they're all like, yeah, could be fun. That's the first way that he's evil. He's an instigator. He's a tempter. The second way, and kind of the more important for this video, is he is the thought leader of the group. Throughout the text, several times he goes on like these long monologues about mankind and the nature of violence and mortality, and he describes his own personal code as being the universal moral code that everything adheres to, and he calls it historical law. The second rule is the one that I want to address because his philosophies play a big role as the plot matures. So I'm going to read you like a paragraph of him kind of talking about historical law, and then I'm going to go back through it sentence by sentence and talk about what I think he means by this. This is with one member of the group pushing back on a claim that he just made. Might does not make right, said the living. The man that wins in combat is not vindicated morally. And the judge responds, moral law is an invention of mankind for the disenfranchisement of the powerful in favor of the weak. Historical law subverts it at every turn. A moral view can never be proven right or wrong by any ultimate test. A man falling dead in a duel is not thought thereby to be proven in error as to his views, but his very involvement in such a trial gives evidence to a new and broader view. The willingness of the principles to forego further argument as the triviality which in fact it is, and to petition directly the chambers of history, absolutely clearly indicates of how little moment are the opinions, and of what great moment the divergences thereof. For the argument is indeed trivial. Man's vanity may well approach the infinite in capacity, but his knowledge remains imperfect, and however much he comes to value his judgment, ultimately he must submit them before a higher court. Here there can be no special pleading. Here are considerations of equity and rectitude and moral right rendered void without warrant, and here are the views of the litigants despised. Decisions of life and death, and what shall be and what shall not, beggar all question of right. In elections of these magnitudes are all lesser ones subsumed, moral, spiritual, and natural. Okay, so what does any of that mean? We're going to talk about it. First, morality is an invention of mankind to disenfranchise the powerful in favor of the weak. Flaming hot take to start out with, but pretty straightforward. He's saying morality was invented to rob the powerful of what they rightly deserve and give it to the weak. Example, if a big strong guy robs an old grandmother, Judge Holden would argue that the big strong guy has every right to, and morality was invented to rob the big strong guy of what he rightly deserves, to give it to the old grandmother. Next line, historical law subverts it at every turn. A moral view can never be proven right or wrong by any ultimate test. A man falling dead in a duel is not thought thereby to be proven in error as to his views. And I'm cutting the thought in half there because I want to talk about the first half and the second half. This is where it starts to get interesting. It really gets interesting in the second half of this thought, but let's talk about the first half first. What he's talking about when he says historical law, he means the law of superior violence, meaning the person that is more capable of violence, enforcing what they want, that is the ruling moral code of the universe. Historical law subverts it at every turn. What he's saying is, every chance it gets, any time that moral law is pitted against the law of superior violence, historical law is going to beat out moral law. If the big strong guy goes to rob the grandmother, historical law says he can do that. Moral law says he can't. Which one's going to win every single time? Historical law. That's what Judge Holden is saying here. A moral view can never be proven right or wrong by any absolute test. Nothing you can do can prove that your moral code is the right one and someone else's is wrong. A man falling dead in a duel is not thought thereby to be proven in error as to his views. You losing a fight doesn't mean that your moral code was right or wrong. And the next line, here's the kicker. But his very involvement in such a trial gives evidence of a new and broader view. Losing doesn't mean your moral view is wrong, but your involvement, your willingness to participate in such a test as fighting somebody over your moral law implies that you acknowledge that the world is not ruled by your moral law, but by the law of superior violence. Whoever's better at fighting. Banger, banger, banger. Last couple of lines. Here are considerations of equity and rectitude and moral right rendered void and without warrant. And here are the views of litigants despised, decisions of life and death, of what shall be and what shall not, beggar all question of right. In elections of these magnitudes are all lesser ones subsumed, moral, spiritual, natural. Historical law does not care what you think, not care what you think is right or fair. All that matters is the verdict that it will eventually deliver. And in that verdict, all lower judgments are rendered null. Does that make sense? Because I will not be going over it again. When I talk about historical law or the law of superior violence, that is what I'm talking about. I'm going to talk about it a lot in this video. The ultimate ruling force of the universe is historical law. That's where the judge's catchphrase comes from, war is God. So the book goes on, and the kid becomes kind of like It's not outright said it, but he's like one of, if not the best fighter in the group. That's very important. Remember that. Crew goes around committing unspeakable tragedies, sometimes because for money, other times because the judge convinced them that it would be fun. Eventually they settle down extorting, murdering settlers who are trying to cross the Colorado River. The Yuma people attack them and kill almost everybody except for the kid, his friend, and the judge. All of whom quickly turn on each other. A bunch of stuff happens that doesn't matter, and then 30 years go by. The boy is now called the Man. He has a beard. He never married, and he kind of spent the last 30 years wandering through the American Southwest. You could say maybe trying to atone for what happened with the Glanton gang, or at the very least, I would argue, kind of exploring his own ideas about morality that aren't tainted by the judge or by the Glanton gang. He goes into work escorting pioneers into California. Remember, he has this really violent past, and he's really good at it. So when bad people come to try to rob the settlers, he protects them. And there's a couple instances of him demonstrating like legitimate altruism. He risks his life to save an old lady that turned out to be dead already. On several occasions, he spares men that he could have killed. His line of work, definitionally, necessarily involves sacrificing his own personal safety to a degree. He, the powerful, giving up something in favor of these settlers, the weak. That's all well and good until one night he's in a saloon, and I'm gonna read this, and watching him across the layered smoke in the yellow light was the judge. And the judge is not happy with the boy man now. And to begin this interaction, to illustrate his unhappiness, he kills a baby bear. So the entertainment in the saloon that night was this little girl, and she's a pet bear, and they're dancing, and the judge shoots the bear. Everybody screams, and the little girl starts crying over her dead bear, and then everybody kind of goes back to what they were doing before. That's kind of a recurring thing in this book, is crazy violence happens, and then everybody just that wasn't involved, just goes back to their day. It's kind of fun. Weird book. Anyway, so the judge comes over to the man, and the little girl is sitting over her baby bear saying, "It's all over. It's all over." And I'm going to read their exchange to you. "Do you believe it's all over, son?" He takes his hat off. The last of the true, I'd say they're all gone under now, saving me and thee. Would you not?" He looks around. "Plenty of time for the dance." "I ain't studying no dance." The judge smiles. "I gotta go." The judge looked around aggrieved. "Go?" he said. "What man would not be a dancer if he could?" said the judge. "It's a great thing, the dance." I'm cutting a lot from the text here, because it would take me like an hour to read all of this. But when the judge says the dance, he's talking about what he and the kid did with the Glanton gang, which is giving oneself totally and completely to the law of superior violence. I tell you this, as war becomes dishonored, and its nobility called into question, those honorable men who recognize the sanctity of blood will become excluded from the dance, which is the warrior's right. And thereby the dance will become a false dance, and the dancers false dancers. And yet there will be one there always who is a true dancer. And can you guess who that might be? You ain't nothing. You speak truer than you know. But I will tell you, only a man who has offered up himself entire to the blood of war, who has been to the floor of the pit and seen horror in the round and learned that it speaks to his inmost heart, only that man can dance. He's making an appeal to the kid. He's saying, I know who you are, and I know who you used to be. Talking about this great warrior that he was with the Glanton gang. And this is your birthright, and you need to return to it. Even a dumb animal can dance. Hear me, man, he said. There is room on the stage for one beast and one alone. All others are destined for a single night that is eternal and without name. One by one they will step down into the darkness before the footlamps. Bears that dance, bears that don't. There's a reason that the judge is so worked up about the kid's rejection of historical law. By choosing to do what he thinks is right, instead of using his power to take whatever he wants, he flies directly in the face of this moral philosophy that the judge has been espousing for like 500 pages now. If the kid chooses to adhere to a moral code, war cannot be God. The kid says, I am capable of superior violence. I am the keeper of historical law. The judge goes, therefore you must serve it. You must do what is dictated by the reality that you live in. And the kid says, no, instead I will own it. If I am the keeper of historical law, then morality is whatever I say it is. Because I am the keeper of historical law, because I am capable of superior violence, I earn the right to live by and enforce whatever moral code I want. The judge observes historical law by rendering himself subservient to it. The boy observes historical law by dominating it. The judge ultimately serves violence as though it were a god. The kid uses violence to make a god of himself. The kid accepts that historical law may be the ultimate ruling authority on this earth, but he also realizes the reality that historical law has no abstract power beyond the keepers of it. It has no actual ability to enforce its verdicts. So who's right? And that's the question that all three of these books kind of obsess over. And they all come back with different answers. I'll tell you what Blood Meridian comes back with. I'm going to spoil the end here for you. But Blood Meridian really isn't a book where your enjoyment of it is going to get affected by the end having the end spoiled. The judge leaves the bar. The boy goes out to an outhouse. The judge is waiting for him, and he kills the boy. You could say the law of superior violence wins. That takes round one. In the end, the boy found himself unable to enforce his moral code because he ended up not being the keeper of superior violence. So that's kind of the verdict of Blood Meridian. That's why the book gets called really bleak, really dark sometimes. And that's kind of where Cormac McCarthy starts this argument. The book was written in 1985, and the other books won't be written until 2005 and 2006. So he wouldn't really come back to this argument for another 30 years. Those are the arguments that he puts forth in this book. In a subsequent video, I'm going to cover No Country for Old Men, and then in the next video, I'll cover The Road. And we'll kind of look at how this idea evolves, and you know, he responds to this, and he reacts to it, and he goes, hey, listen, you know, maybe this isn't the end all be all. Maybe I didn't have everything right back in 1985. Thanks so much for watching. I will be uploading, I think, every day these 3 videos, so the next one should be up very soon. I love you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making it this far. I really hope that I see you in the next video.